Hello everyone, welcome back to the Ask Dr. Be Good show, where we bring you the good things that are happening in public education and at Legacy. Today we're going to talk about safety, and we're going to do that because safety laws have changed. Due to the last legislative session, the 86th session that just finished in May, there are huge changes to the law around safety and how to be safer at school. And so before we go much further, let's go ahead and introduce who we have here today. Talk a little bit about yourself and your background about why you have become our district safety person.
Sure. So my name is Staci Weaver, and I'm the Senior Director of Operations, and I oversee our safety and security. I'm a retired law enforcement officer. I've also taught in Broward County, Florida at the Criminal Justice Center, and I've continued to maintain certification here now in Texas. And I think I've gotten certified in every safety and security requirement that TA is now mandated.
So I know that you're part of some statewide groups, safety groups, and are even chatting with other schools around meeting the requirements. In this case, we're going to talk about the requirements around staying safe, because these are now laws. Before we did have a few laws and we had some good intentions, but due to the last school shooting, we now have laws that we must follow. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about Senate Bill 11.
Sure.
And what does that mean to public schools now in Texas?
Okay, so Senate Bill 11, it includes threat assessment, parental involvement, mental health support, safety planning, and security personnel. So under each of those branches is a tremendous amount of information. But the main focus right now is that we are setting up on every campus threat assessment teams. So that was the biggest piece that came out of the Santa Fe shooting, that had there been a team in place and had they been monitoring and observing the actions of students, that had any act of violence or behavior that should have triggered monitoring, there really was no plan for that. And so now the state of Texas has determined, and it's effective immediately, and we at Legacy have already done this, that we have training and put together a threat assessment team.
So you're reminding me of a story that of the young man from Allen who went down to El Paso and shot up at a Walmart. At my church, one of the musicians told the story that he was that child's music teacher for several years, and he could tell there was something off with that child. But back then, and this would have been probably 15 years ago, nothing was done. I mean, people knew the child was off, but that the outcome of a possibility of that child becoming dangerous was just not there. Well, come now forward, 15 years, and the threat assessment team is now in place. It's a much more sophisticated way of approaching kids, and I see this as a short-term and long-term solution. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and you're absolutely correct. That's the same thing with Parkland. If you go back and think about all of the coverage on Parkland, you could hear that the police were called to the house so many times about weapons. Teachers were reported, said that there were so many, conversations and talk after the fact that they knew if there was ever going to be a shooter, it was him. When they found out what was happening, they immediately thought of that student. That should never happen. That student should have been in the hands of qualified mental health specialists, and through a threat assessment would have probably gotten to that point. And that's exactly why we're in the situation that we're in now.
So talk a little bit about who makes up the threat assessment team.
Sure. So our threat assessment team is our counselors, our school principals or directors, several teachers, and myself. School resource officers, if you have them on a campus as well. And so what happens is, in the beginning, the counselor will go ahead and do the first step of the assessment and decide where to go from there. And then once she decides, we'll look at it in a few minutes when we get to that part, we have a flow chart of how we do that. But what I'll show you is how this all came in. We have a quick little video, and it'll show you how schools are thinking about threat assessment teams and how important and why. So if we can bring that video up, and then it'll give us some more points that can further explain the necessity of this.
Law enforcement, Diaz is one of the first to bring the threat assessment screening model to a school campus in Texas.
We have a screening process with questions. Key questions have been identified by the Secret Service, by the FBI in assessing threats. We see how they answer those questions. We're looking at social factors, we're looking at other influences, peer pressure, different things that could be going on in their lives.
Specifically, any threat with the intention of causing bodily injury. Students are deemed either level 1, less severe, or level 2, a heightened risk for carrying out a threat. From last December through May, the district conducted threat assessments on 71 of its 8,000 students.
During that interview, do you dislike this teacher? Why? And if they start to provide reasons, and in that process you ask, do you really feel about hurting? Do you understand what hurting someone truly means?
Sometimes students do, which is when the red flags start going up and the screening process becomes more elaborate, requiring Diaz to fill out an 18-page assessment with questions like, how easily can this student access weapons? Is there a scheduled attack? What is their social status among peers? Do they have a mental health diagnosis? And what kind of family life do they have?
And based on the information we have, we develop a management strategy that may involve safety plans to make sure that everyone is safe, and also counseling plans. And we assess how well we're doing.
Diaz points to early data showing the threat assessment model is working. Of the 71 students flagged, 70% of the potential threats were de-escalated, 23% stayed as the lower level Tier 1 incidents, while 7% escalated to Tier 2.
Yeah, every camera is connected.
If this all sounds like a novel experiment, it'll soon be a reality where you live too. Starting this year, every school district in the state is required to have a similar student threat assessment model. What do you think about this student threat assessment?
I think it's an important component of keeping our students safe.
Chief Ashley Gonzalez says having this kind of information on high-risk students could be the difference between de-escalating a potential threat and getting caught off guard.
Some of those times, those issues can escalate into self-harm or violence against others, and that's what we're trying to prevent.
Part of the benefit? When a student switches schools, there won't be any guessing or reading between the lines when it comes to past disciplinary issues. Instead, a completed threat assessment will be available for administrators to look through.
We want to make sure that if a student has been identified that they continue to receive services. And just because they're moving to another campus, another school, or promoting to a different grade, that doesn't mean the services stop and that information is not shared.
Weatherford also passes along the threat assessment to other school districts if a student transfers, so long as the new district requests it. Like the threat assessment itself, Diaz hopes this type of sharing can serve as a model for how Texas schools interact with each other when it comes to safety and security.
If I'm a counselor and I've developed an effective strategy with this child, I want to make sure that the strategies that I'm employing are going to be handed off to the next counselor so that we can keep that child on that successful pathway.
Diaz says with so many assessments, case management is a problem. The district is looking at acquiring a database to track the progress.
Tom, I can imagine there are also privacy concerns.
There are those concerns. Both FERPA and HIPAA apply to this kind of information, but both of them have safety exemptions.
And as we mentioned, every district in the state's going to implement the same thing this school year.
Yeah, they are, and it'll be up to the Texas School Safety Center at Texas State University to audit districts and determine which are non-compliant.
All right, Tom, thank you. Our Save Our Students coverage continues all week on air and online.
Online now, explore our digital project, Save Our Students.
Okay, so here's some of the takeaways that I got. One is that it must be implemented this year. There was no wait time, right?
Immediately was our instructions.
Yes. And then if a child has a completed threat assessment packet and the parent decides they have to move to another district, that information follows the child.
Correct. And as you know, records are requested through T-Rex, so they'll be requested in that same form, and our registers will know to go to the counselor and always ask if, if students do we have any students, at the end of the school year, do we have any students that had threat assessments? That way they can flag it, and if it's requested, it can be sent in the proper manner to the new school district.
And another thing I heard was the FERPA and the HIPAA has a safety exclusion.
Correct.
So parents can't say you can't send that about my child.
Correct.
The state of Texas says that must go.
Right, because that was the big obstacle with the whole threat assessment, that if we did it and then the parent wasn't a compliant parent and wanted to leave with their child because they didn't like that they were being monitored or even thought as a threat, that they could just take them somewhere else and nobody knows that a threat exists on their campus.
So let's talk a little bit about some examples of what happens when a kindergartner makes a gun out of his peanut butter and jelly sandwich at lunch.
So it used to be immediately that child, it's terroristic threats.
Right.
That child, expulsion hearing, things like that. It's not that simple anymore. With a threat assessment and that 18-page packet that you saw, that helps you decide if the child has a motive, can carry it out. It's not feasible to do it. Then we go to a why is this happening? Why did the child do this? It's more restorative and more behavioral and more on a mental health side, looking at it from there. Why would a child do that? Was he just playing? Is his daddy a police officer?
Are they hunters at home?
Sure.
Yeah.
How do they interact? It could be so natural for them, and that they don't know that it's a threat. And when you go through that packet, all of that is included in there for you to determine and talk to the parent and get from the child. So if the child just happened to be eating the peanut butter jelly and it started to look like a gun and that's what it looked like, it could be that simple, so we're not overreacting. We'll monitor, we'll watch that child after it happens. If we don't see any other violent natures or anything, fixations on a gun or weapons, we'll close it out.
So I'm hearing that the zero tolerance days are gone, because those were a little silly. If a kindergartner brought a plastic gun to school because he's allowed to play with guns, and there's that's maybe dad is a police officer or a soldier, right? Or a hunter, and guns are a natural part of their world, then a plastic gun that only makes a clicking noise, if they're brought to school, will not cause a referral and a suspension and all that. That's what I'm hearing. It will, however, cause the threat assessment committee to meet.
Correct.
And then what?
So if you can just put up that slide we have, and I'll better give you an idea so you can actually look at it and see how it works.
The flow chart?
The flow chart, yes. Just give us 1 second and we'll bring that up. All right, so this is what we look at now. So basically, we don't go immediately to going to the law enforcement or police reports, custody and things like that. What we do is we look at, we kind of start in the center where our directors and our counselors, safety, we get together and we do a level 1 assessment. If you see in the center it says unfounded concerns, then we just go to deferment paperwork, which means we're deferring them out of any legal, we don't need the police, and we don't feel like it's a high mental health priority, but we're going to monitor them. So they go to deferment. We call the parent, though? We call the parent in, we discuss with the parent what we saw. If we feel that the child has violent tendencies, has the possibility to carry it out, lets us know he has a gun and he has access to a gun and his parents don't lock a gun and he's expressing hate or violence, then we're going to an immediate response level, tier 2, where we're going to call law enforcement in so that they're part of it. Or if you have school marshals on your campus, they can be a part of that to help guide the counselors from the legal side. And we bring in the parents. We don't bring in the parent until we've determined all of these things. We monitor, we put together a behavior plan, interventions, increased supervision. If that doesn't work, that's where we move to that level 2, and then it's even more increased supervision, interventions, placements, referral for mental health evaluation may come into this. We give them the community resources that we have, and we work from there together with everybody.
Parents are a big part of this.
Parents are such a tremendous part of this. We can't move forward without parent cooperation. And you have to tread lightly because this is very hard. Some parents and other parents are going to be hearing this and say, how could you be unaware? Columbine, those parents were completely and totally unaware, honestly unaware, just mortified, had no idea that their sons could ever think of or carry out something. And so it's very hard to get a parent sometimes to believe and recognize, and so it's an intricate part of this plan working is parents being involved and supporting us.
And trusting the school,
Yes,
trusting the
us.
process.
Yes, that we're doing something in the best interest of their child and not to get rid of, hurt, or label their child.
And that's probably one of their fears, is that threat assessment packet might label their child. So the way that we need to make sure we explain it, if their child triggers it, is to understand that this is just a way of making sure that if a child needs mental health, needs anger management, that we work together with the parents to get those that type of help to the child.
Correct. Absolutely. And that's the most important thing, is to let parents know when you call them in, when you present it, this is how we're going to support your child. This is how we're going to help. We're going to monitor and assist. We give them a lot of community resources. Our counselors, I think I gave them 10 pages of resources. And in all those resources, majority of them are at no cost. So we try to find things that are definitely relevant to the students that we have and the parents and their needs. It's really meant as a support tool.
So it's, like I said earlier, long-term, short-term solutions. Short-term for the more aggressive behaviors that we see, but long-term for those kids who are starting in that direction, much like the young man that I spoke to that exhibited off behavior to the musician at school. Maybe if we had known to report that and to start working with the child, those aggressive tendencies would not have played out that way.
And that's what we say, see something, say something. That's a big part of it, having that on your website somewhere, in the school where kids can report things and say things without fear of retaliation or, being called, as they say, a snitch, things like that. And we've had tremendous help. We've had students that have run away and things like that. And our students, when we've reached out to them, they've realized that we are a support, and the counselors come from that support. Your counselors are great resources when you have that. By getting those kids in and talking to them, it helped us find the girl, the child that was missing. So, but it's all about trust, culture, and climate. And before you can do anything, you have to have that trust in culture and climate in order for anybody to take this help.
What are the timelines around all of this? How long does that take? Little Johnny brings a plastic gun to school, and the teacher reports it. And then what happens?
Okay, so if he just brings it to school, it may be something where we call mom and say, hey, we don't allow those toys. And it may be just that. If he actually uses it and he uses any type of language or verbiage, like I'm going to kill you, I'm going to shoot you, things like that, or I hate you, then
that escalates
escalates it right there. And we're already on tier 1 and looking to whether we're moving to tier 2. And so that the first step is the counselor sitting down with the child, and it could take anywhere from a half hour to 45 minutes with the little ones. It could take longer with the older ones because they're able to answer so many more questions and so many more things in that assessment applied to your older students. And it escalates with age of how many things you can ask, because they can be receptive and answer. But it is timely and lengthy, but it covers so much important information. I mean, little ones will tell you a lot. You'd be surprised. From the mouth of babes comes the truth.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yeah.
So you brought another video.
Yeah, and this is going to discuss how we're trained, basically. Most of our training is done through Texas State Safety Center in San Marcos. They're a tremendous resource. They do all the training through Region 10. So if we can bring that video up and give you an idea of how this was rolled out and what the expectation was bringing it back.
School districts across the entire state are now required to set up threat assessment teams. The change came after the Santa Fe High School shooting and the security bill that passed the legislature this last spring.
That training is centered in San Marcos at the Texas School Safety Center. KXAN political reporter Phil Prazen went to one of the training sessions today, with many more to come.
The Texas legislature created the Texas School Safety Center after the shooting at Columbine High School. They've since researched and developed training that is now mandatory. The lieutenant over the Hays County School Resource Officers says they learned how to find out how serious a threat is.
You know that the kid maybe has gone to a gun range and was practicing, so it could be something as simple as a couple of hours. It could be taking a couple of days. So it just depends on manpower and how fast you can move with the information.
It's a multi-part process filled with interviews, background research, and action steps to take. It will now be uniform across the whole state.
It makes it more efficient so that if we have to share information with, say, another agency or another county or school district, then we're on the same page.
The new law outlines who's on the team: parents, law enforcement, teachers, and more. Officials from Del Valley, Bernie, and Austin ISD went through Friday's training.
The magnitude of this is huge. It's far-reaching.
Laura Stone is a school safety specialist with the center. She says they measure results by the information they collect and the actions they stop.
And having a way to prevent and interrupt a student's possible plans so that they never come to fruition. So having a lot of stories that are never told because they never happened.
This process is really just beginning because between October and January there will be 50 more training sessions across the entire state. In San Marcos, Phil Prayson, KXAN News.
To expand this statewide and to audit all those districts every 3 years, the Texas School Safety Center will have to hire more than 20 extra people. Lawmakers approved the money to pay for them in the budget that begins September 1st. Here's how it works. The threat assessment must first ask, does the situation present an imminent danger or safety concern? If the answer is yes, law enforcement is contacted. So are parents or any other person who may be directly impacted. Then the threat assessment team will ask these questions you can see on your screen. If the answer is yes to any of them, a full threat assessment inquiry is done. If the answers are all no, the incident is documented and the information is added to a database. The full threat assessment continues to ask more questions while gathering as much information as possible from social media, counselors, and teachers.
Earlier this week, we took you to Weatherford, a district near Dallas, as part of our Save Our Students project. The district has been a model for other districts when it comes to safety assessments. From last December through May, the district has conducted threat assessments on 71 of its 8,000 students. The district fills out an 18-page questionnaire to try to decipher if threats are credible. We have a list of those questions along with our full story on KXAN.com. Just click on the Save Our Students tab.
So one of the things I'm left with is that the state of Texas is taking this so seriously that they're actually funding it.
Yes.
Which is
unusual.
Tells a big story.
Yes.
And the governor is very serious about this. And there's really, we need to start moving in that direction ASAP. And we have, at Legacy, we already have. I know we have another meeting when is the meeting? The safety meeting? We had that Thursday? Anyway, we'll put that up on the bulletin. But we're not playing here. We can't play. The state of Texas doesn't want to play. And one of the things that we need to leave parents with is the understanding that what kids put in their backpack and bring to school, it's important that they know. If your child has a lot of guns that they like to play with, and I'm not putting down that they can't play with guns at home. Please know that's not what I say. But bringing them to school is a bad idea and will trigger an immediate reaction.
Absolutely.
Even if, and what I saw here, even if there's no threat, it's still, the incident is put in the database.
Correct, because we put a lot of faith, and we should, in our counselors, but there may be a time where they miss something or don't ask the right question, and if we don't have that child in the database and it happens again, then we don't see and we're missing it and there's a gap. So we just document and put it in the database so that we don't have those gaps, and that if it starts to become a pattern, even though each time it doesn't seem like much, those not seem like much add up to much.
So it's a matter of having those safety conversations at home.
Absolutely. And in fact, after we do like our active shooter drills, I always put on Facebook to our parents, thank you for your patience during the drill, and please discuss this with your child when they come home. We'll do so in a restorative practice, a circle after we do but it's really important that when they come home, you talk about it with them, let them discuss their feelings, and in that way it's a common conversation that's taking place, so the child's always aware that we at the school take it serious.
So I can see that a parent to do, after listening to this podcast, is to have a talk with kids around the importance of safety at school, and they say something, see something. Say something. Say something. Yes. Is number one, and for them to feel comfortable doing that, and if they don't feel comfortable saying it to somebody at school, to say it to the parent, and the parent will say something. And also to not do things like bring knives, and even if they're fake knives, fake guns, can't have that at school. Nunchucks. We've had kids bring all sorts of things that they're learning in their Taekwondo class. You can't bring them to school.
It's a weapon. And I think, we encourage our children when they see something to say something. We need parents to do the same also. We had a parent today that said to one of our nurses, I saw this, but I don't know, should I report it or tell anybody? And the nurse said, well, you just did. And that, yes, you should. And then she came to me and we took care of it, and we reacted to what happened and put something in place so that doesn't happen again. So it's important for parents to do the same. Absolutely, no different.
Now, we only have a few minutes left, but we were lucky enough to be granted a safety grant. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we were presented with a safety grant from TEA, and with that money, we are using it to make all of our entries and exits safer. So all of our entries and exits, not only do they have cameras on them, but they'll have keyless entries, automatic locking, so that the door locks every time immediately, all of our exterior doors. In addition to that, we're going to be doing mobile apps on all of the teachers' phones and all of the district personnel. So if we have any type of active shooter on campus, we're all in contact immediately, not only with the way that our policy, to use a PA, announce it, go into lockdown, but now we'll be able to have immediate contact with each other. And teachers will know, don't come out of the room, and teachers can tell us if they hear something going on, or I hear somebody outside they can just type that all into their phone. It goes to us and the police department.
And I believe it's also an opportunity for teachers to tell other teachers if they have their other teachers' kids that
Absolutely.
They snagged out of the hallway.
Because when we train our students, we tell them, if we going into a lockdown, you go into the nearest classroom or go into the bathroom, wherever. So if a teacher grabbed 10 kids and took them with her into a room, she can say, I have 10 students with me, teachers missing students, and we'll know, we can at least identify where they are, and it puts people's mind at ease, even when we're going through this, that their kids are okay.
So again, it leaves me with the understanding that the state of Texas is putting money behind this requirement. We in the public education business live in the world of unfunded and partially funded mandates. And this is not one of those. This is one where the state of Texas is making funds available to make sure our schools get safer. Now, we've done a lot over the years before this to get safer. We added panic buttons at the reception doors area. We have locks on the doors. We have cameras. We have bullet stopping, bullet resistant film on the glass. Mm-hmm. There's things that we've done over the years, but this adds another level and recognizes the fact that we can't just make a building safe.
No.
That's a huge takeaway here.
It's a mentality. It's people don't even realize it's as simple as teaching our children don't piggyback. When they come in, don't hold the door open for a stranger that's coming to school behind you. Our kids will hold the door for anybody because they're sweet, and we teach them to be polite, but we now have to teach them you can't be that polite. You have to shut the door and they have to wait and be buzzed in. Teaching those behaviors where we used to not think about that. Teaching kids not to piggyback, which we would never even thought of, has become a norm.
So thank you for coming on and sharing your information. If as we get more information from the state of Texas, we'll come on and share that also. But for right now, parents should be left feeling safer and not be scared about, for example, the 18-page threat assessment packet. That would rarely be, out of the 71 kids, most of those kids did not get past the no.
Correct.
And so it was only a few on tier 1 and even less on tier 2. So that helps parents understand that this is not a way of labeling any kid who happens to trigger the threat assessment committee. It is a way of keeping those most vulnerable on our radar so that we can get help to them and hopefully get them to de-escalate over the years to where they don't grow up to be adults that want to hurt others. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ask Dr. Be Good show. For more information on Legacy Preparatory Charter Schools, visit our website, legacypca.com, or call 469-249-1099. And remember to like us on Facebook, where we stream live weekly Tuesdays at 3 p.m.